have a coffee machine.
Oh, okay. Well, you want the one that you got for Dad and I?
No.
It's just a little one-cup coffee machine?
I have no place to put it.
Oh, okay.
And, like, if I do have coffee in the morning and I don't have my instant, I just go to my mailroom neighbor and I'll ask him, can you make me coffee? And he'll be like, okay. I'm spoiled.
You are spoiled.
I am spoiled. I am. He's been seeing me eating salads lately because that's what I've been eating. And he came over with some like little granolas. He gave one to Mike and one to my other coworker and then one to me. He goes, I know Jules needs to eat this. She hasn't ate anything today. I said, bullshit, I ate my salad. Didn't you see it? He goes, exactly. You didn't eat anything today.
Okay. Well, I gotta go, so I got laundry that I'm gonna take care of.
Oh, be glad that I told Matt the right book to get you. Because I told him, I said, hey, whenever you look it up, I said, you know what, I'm just going to send you the link. Because if I don't send you the link, you're going to look up the wrong book. And I said, there's just one by Nicholas Sparks. So he looks up, Lucky One. And he goes, a book by Nicholas Sparks. This one? I said, no, not that one. I'm like, oh shit, that would be great if my mom got the Nicholas Sparks book instead of this one. Shit. I would have been hearing, Julie, you have the totally wrong book.
No, that's the one that you should probably send to, Sarah.
Oh.
She ain't gonna have time to read it.
She's not gonna have time to read it.
Oh.
She's gonna have chitlins.
She's gonna have chitlins.
Who wants chitlins?
I know, right? Ugh.
Oh my gosh, I can't even get them past my nose.
I can't.
You're not supposed to eat them.
Yeah, okay. The children you're not supposed to eat, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, you get your stuff finished.
Yeah, I'll be talking to you later. I'll let you know when I get it.
Okay, or if we get a notification saying it's on the way, we can just let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Oh my god. Can't we all just get along? Each my own bed with quick ropes.
Fucking white people going off about that. Why are you changing it? Why are you changing it? It's fucking syrup. But one, it's racial insulting.
Are they gonna change Uncle Ben's also?
Yeah, I think they're getting rid of it. Whatever it was on there.
I always thought it was the dude from Rafiki. That dude. I always thought it was him. Is it not him?
I don't know.
What is his name? He's the butler.
Robert Guillaume.
Yeah. I always thought it was him.
No. He may have been the spokesman. And then worse to you, I guess, on that.
Excuse me? No, that's so not true. Wesley Snipes and Cuba Gooding look totally different. Cuba Gooding would not have made a really good looking blade.
Pick two guys.
I know. I only picked two. I know. I was trying to think of two that I know that didn't look like. Same as Jet Li and Jackie Chan don't look like. Of course, there's always the Denzel Washington and the, what's his name?
Denzel Washington Jr.
No. Morpheus. Lawrence Jackson. Or Lawrence Fishburne.
They do not look like.
No. But, oh my gosh, I can't believe how many people are... Yeah, weren't you in that commercial for the... What the hell are you talking about? Keep it in your wallet, the Capital One?